Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Haunted Forest. The Isle of Wight is a place of quiet beauty, where the waves of the English Channel kiss the rugged cliffs, and mist curls around ancient forests. But there's one forest no one speaks of, tucked deep inland, far from the quaint seaside town's fallow wood. Locals avoid it, warning of things that stir in the trees at night, but no one will say exactly what. It's said to be a cursed place, steeped in dark history and mystery, where the boundary between the living and the dead blurs. Holly Arnold had heard all the stories, but she was not one to be frightened off by a few legends. Adventurous to a fault, she thrived on the thrill of the unknown. That's why, on a crisp autumn weekend, she and her friends decided to camp there, away from the hustle of the mainland, seeking peace and perhaps a little excitement. The group consisted of 5: Holly, her boyfriend Tom, her best friend Sarah, Sarah's new partner Mark, and Jack, a quiet, brooding guy who tagged along more out of habit than desire. The plan was simple: set up camp, enjoy the serenity, and return with tales of their fearless adventure. They arrived late in the afternoon, the sun low in the sky, casting long shadows across the underbrush. Holly led the way, her sense of adventure sharp as ever. As they walked deeper into the forest, the light seemed to change. What had been golden and soft now became harsh, the trees bending unnaturally, their gnarled branches twisting toward the sky like claws. It was as if they had crossed some invisible threshold. Holly felt a shiver run down her spine but shook it off. The group set up camp near a clearing, pitching their tents in a circle around a small fire. The first few hours passed uneventfully, with laughter and the smell of roasted marshmallows filling the air. But as dusk fell, the forest grew unnervingly silent. No crickets chirped, no leaves rustled in the wind. It was as if the very woods held their breath, waiting. "Do you hear that?" Sarah asked, breaking the silence, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Hear what?" Holly responded, though she already sensed something was off. The hair on the back of her neck stood on end, a prickle of instinct telling her they were not alone. "Nothing," Sarah murmured. "That's the problem. It's too quiet." The wind stirred, and a low, hollow sound echoed from deep within the forest. It was a moan, faint and distant, but unmistakably human. Everyone froze. Tom, trying to maintain his composure, chuckled nervously. "Probably just the wind," he said, though his voice wavered. Holly wasn't so sure. The sound had felt deliberate, like it had purpose. As night fully descended, the fire crackled weakly, unable to chase away the encroaching darkness. Shadows grew, stretching unnaturally long, their shapes bending and twisting in ways that defied logic. Holly scanned the tree line, her heart hammering against her chest. For a moment she thought she saw something move between the trees, an indistinct figure, pale and translucent, watching. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice tight. Tom glanced in the direction she was looking, his brow furrowing. "See what?" Holly hesitated. It was gone now, as if the forest had swallowed it whole. "I don't know, I thought I saw someone." Mark stood abruptly. "This place is creeping me out. I'm going to get more wood for the fire. I'll come with you," Jack offered, his tone distant. They left the clearing, their footsteps quickly fading into the underbrush. Holly watched them go, a sense of unease gnawing at her. She leaned closer to Tom. "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea." "No, it's fine. It's just nerves," Tom reassured her, though even he didn't sound convinced. Minutes passed, then an hour. Jack and Mark didn't return. "Where are they?" Sarah asked, her voice high with anxiety. "It shouldn't take this long." Holly stood, trying to shake off the creeping dread that clung to her. "Stay here. I'll go look for them." Tom grabbed her arm. "You're not going alone." Together, Holly and Tom ventured into the dark, their flashlight beams cutting weakly through the thick night. The trees loomed overhead, and with every step the forest seemed to press closer. The silence was deafening. There was no sign of Mark or Jack, not even broken branches or disturbed leaves to suggest they had passed this way. It was as if they had simply disappeared. Suddenly, Holly stopped. In the beam of her flashlight, something glistened on the ground of blood. Her stomach lurched as she crouched down, her fingers trembling as she touched the dark stain. Tom, before she could finish her sentence, a low growl rumbled from the shadows. The air grew cold and the light from the flashlight flickered. Holly looked up just in time to see a pair of eyes staring at her from the darkness, glowing inhuman eyes. Something massive, its form obscured by the night, shifted among the trees. It wasn't a man. It wasn't even an animal. It was something else, something ancient and malevolent. Tom backed away, his voice barely a whisper. Run! They sprinted back to the camp, their breath coming in ragged gasps, but as they burst into the clearing, they found it empty. The fire was out and Sarah was gone. Only her tent remained, torn open, the fabric slashed by what looked like claw marks. Panic surged through Holly. Sarah, there was no answer. Only the oppressive silence of the forest. Where is everyone? Holly's voice cracked as she spun around, scanning the tree line. From the darkness, that same low moan echoed again, closer this time. And then, one by one, figures began to emerge from the trees. Pale, gaunt, their eyes hollow and lifeless, ghostly apparitions, watching. Holly felt cold terror wash over her. These weren't just ghosts. They were something worse, bound to the forest, drawn to it by whatever curse lingered in the soil. Their eyes locked onto her, unblinking, and she realized with horrifying clarity that they had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for them. "Tom, we have to get out of here," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. But Tom wasn't moving. He stood frozen, his eyes wide with shock as one of the apparitions slowly approached. Its hand reached out, skeletal fingers stretching toward him. Holly grabbed his arm and pulled, but it was too late. The ghostly figure touched him, and Tom collapsed, his body limp and lifeless. A scream tore from Holly's throat as she stumbled backward, her flashlight dropping to the ground. The apparitions moved closer, their forms flickering like broken images in an old film. Desperate, Holly turned and ran, her feet pounding against the forest floor as the trees closed around her. But no matter how far she ran, the figures were always just behind her, their ghostly whispers filling the air, their eyes watching her every move. The forest itself seemed to shift and warp, leading her deeper into its heart where no one could find her. Finally, exhausted and out of breath, Holly stumbled into another clearing. In the center stood an ancient, gnarled tree, its roots twisted and blackened. And beneath its shadow she saw them, Sarah, Jack, and Mark. Their bodies lay motionless, their faces pale as death, their eyes wide open, staring blankly at the sky. Holly collapsed to her knees, her mind reeling. The forest had claimed them. It had claimed all of them. And as the ghostly apparitions closed in around her, Holly understood the truth. There was no escape. Fallow Wood wasn't just haunted. It was alive. And now it had her. The last thing Holly heard was the wind whispering her name before the darkness swallowed her whole. No one ever found their bodies. But sometimes, when the wind blows just right through the trees of Fallow Wood, you can still hear them. Holly Arnold's name quickly became synonymous with mystery after her and her friend's disappearance. The search party scoured Fallow Wood for weeks, but it was as though the earth itself had swallowed them whole. The Isle of Wight residents shook their heads in knowing silence, convinced they were just another group claimed by the cursed forest. Years passed, and Fallow Wood remained uninhabited, its reputation as the haunted forest growing stronger with each retelling. Visitors who dared to stray too close always spoke of strange occurrences, unexplained whispers on the wind, fleeting shadows that moved at the corner of their vision, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. Some claimed to have seen the ghostly figures of campers wandering aimlessly through the trees, their faces pale, their eyes wide with terror. One autumn evening, a young couple, Ryan and Lily, decided to ignore the warnings. They had read the ghost stories, scoffed at the superstitions, and ventured to the Isle of Wight for what they hoped would be a thrilling adventure. They were drawn to Fallow Wood by the mystery that had consumed the island for years. After all, what's a good campfire without a few scary tales to tell? "Don't you think it's creepy?" Lily asked as they hiked into the forest, her breath visible in the chilly air. Ryan smirked. "It's just a forest, babe. People get scared of their own shadows out here," but the deeper they ventured, the more uneasy Lily became. She couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't alone, that something unseen was watching them, just beyond the reach of their flashlights. The trees seemed to bend toward them, their branches clawing at the sky in strange, unnatural shapes. As they set up camp, the atmosphere felt thick with tension. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the forest, and the familiar silence of fallow wood settled in around them. "Hey, maybe we shouldn't stay here," Lily said, her voice shaky. "Something feels wrong," Ryan chuckled as he zipped up the tent. "Relax, Lily. There's nothing out here but trees and squalls." But as the night deepened, it became clear that there was something far more sinister lurking in the woods. Around midnight, a low, mournful moan drifted through the trees. Lily froze, her hand tightening around Ryan's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Ryan sat up, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, but it's probably just the wind." Then another sound of faint crackling, like footsteps crunching over dry leaves, grew louder, circling their camp. Lily's heart raced, her breath shallow. She grabbed the flashlight and shone it into the trees, but there was nothing there. Nothing she could see, anyway. But something was there, watching. The fire flickered, casting eerie shadows across the campsite. And then, from the darkness, there emerged faint, almost translucent figures. Their faces were blank, their forms barely visible, as though they were caught between the physical world and the beyond. The air grew colder, and the whispers started, carried on the wind. "Lila." Lily backed away, her pulse thudding in her ears. "Ryan, we need to go, now." Ryan grabbed the flashlight from her hand, his jaw tight. "There's nothing." Before he could finish his sentence, the light flickered and died. The darkness closed in, and suddenly they were surrounded. Pale, hollow-eyed figures stepped from the shadow, specters of those who had been lost to the forest. Lily's eyes widened in horror as she recognized them. The faces that had haunted local legends for years. Holly Arnold, Sir Tom. They stood among the trees, their forms ghostly, their eyes devoid of life, yet filled with unending terror. Holly's mouth moved, but no sound came out, just the whisper of the wind that carried their voices. "On." Ryan grabbed Lily's hand, and they bolted through the forest, branches whipping against their faces as they ran blindly into the night. Behind them, the whispers grew louder, the figures following, closing in with every step. The forest shifted around them, the paths they had come through no longer making sense. No matter how far they ran, it felt like they were going deeper into the heart of fallow wood. Just as Lily thought she couldn't run any further, they stumbled into a clearing, the same clearing where Holly and her friends had camped all those years ago. The ancient gnarled tree stood in the center, its blackened roots spreading like skeletal fingers across the ground. Lily's heart dropped. There, lying beneath the tree, were bones. Human bones half buried in the earth, covered in moss and decay. And among them was something she recognized: Holly's camping gear, the remnants of her last fateful trip. The ghosts circled them now, their pale faces filled with anguish. Holly stepped forward, her hand outstretched. Her voice, barely a whisper, cut through the cold night air. "You have to leave before it takes you, too." But it was too late. The ground beneath Ryan and Lily trembled, and dark roots snaked up from the earth, wrapping around their legs, pulling them toward the blackened tree. The spirits watched helplessly as the forest claimed them, just as it had claimed Holly, Tom, and the others so many years ago. The last thing Lily saw before the darkness consumed her was Holly's face, her eyes filled with sorrow and regret. The next morning, another search party combed through fallow wood, looking for Ryan and Lily. They found nothing: no tents, no gear, no signs of a struggle. Just the same eerie silence that had haunted the forest for decades. But the whispers continued, carried on the wind, as the ghosts of fallow wood waited patiently for their next visitors. And the legend of Holly Arnold and the haunted forest grew darker still. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.